There is a moment in this story that stopped an entire household cold. A black boy, barefoot and homeless, slipped through the gates of one of London's wealthiest mansions. He had no invitation, no name anyone knew, nothing in his pockets but hunger and a gift he did not know was rare. Inside those gates sat a little white girl in a wheelchair. She had not laughed in 7 months. She had not spoken more than 3 words in a week. And every doctor her billionaire father had flown across the world had told him the same thing. There was nothing more they could do. But in less than 4 minutes, this boy did what millions of pounds could not. And when her father saw it from the window above, he did not call the police. He did not send the boy away. He stood completely still, and for the first time since the passing of his wife, William Hargrove cried. What happened next would divide their entire neighborhood, shake William's business empire, and change 3 lives in ways that none of them could have predicted. Stay with this story until the end, because the moment that broke everything open is not where you think it is. Before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now and tap the like button below this video. Every like tells us you want more stories like this one, and we have many more waiting for you. Now let us get into it. William Hargrove did not become a billionaire by accident. He built his first company at 23 with a borrowed laptop and a sleeping bag on his office floor. From the outside, the Hargrove estate in Hampstead looked the way success was supposed to look. Iron gates, a gravel driveway long enough to feel important, tall hedges that hid everything from the street, a Georgian mansion with 6 bedrooms, a library, a garden that stretched further than most people's dreams, and staff who moved quietly and never asked questions. But behind those gates, William Hargrove was a man running on an empty. His wife, Catherine, had died 18 months ago. A wet road, a lorry that crossed the line, a crash that Clara, strapped in the back seat, survived. But survival had its own price. Clara was 8 years old and had not walked since the night they pulled her from that car. The doctors in London said wait and see. The specialists in New York said the nerve damage was complex. The surgeons in Zurich said they could try but promised nothing. William tried everything. He spent without blinking. He flew Clara first class to every appointment, carried her himself through hospital corridors, sat beside her bed in rooms that smelled of antiseptic and quiet despair. Nothing worked, and slowly, something else began to happen. Clara stopped talking, not completely, but the words came fewer and further apart. The drawings she used to leave on the kitchen table disappeared. The requests for bedtime stories stopped. She would sit by the window for hours, her small hands folded in her lap, staring at a garden she no longer asked to go into. Her nanny, Margaret, did her best. She read aloud. She played soft music. She brought in flowers and placed them near Clara's window. But the light in the girl's eyes had dimmed to something Margaret could not quite reach. William watched all of it from a distance he hated, but did not know how to close. He threw himself into work the way grieving men do when they do not know what else to hold. Early mornings, late nights, calls that stretched past midnight. His assistant once asked if he was all right. He said yes without pausing and moved on to the next item. He was not all right. But William Hargrove had never been the kind of man who admitted that out loud. And so the mansion stayed beautiful and quiet and heavy with everything nobody was saying. Until the afternoon, everything changed. And it did not begin with a doctor, or a breakthrough, or a phone call from a specialist abroad. It began with a sound William had not heard in 7 months, his daughter's laughter. But before he could understand where it was coming from, he would first have to see something that made no sense at all. Nobody in Hampstead knew where Ezra came from exactly. Some of the shopkeepers on the high street recognized his face. The woman who ran the bakery on Flask Walk sometimes left a paper bag outside the back door on cold mornings because she had seen him sleeping near the bins once and had not been able to forget it. The man who managed the car park on Heath Street had chased him away twice before eventually giving up and letting him shelter under the stairwell when the rain was bad. Ezra was 10 years old, black, small for his age, with quick eyes and a mouth that smiled faster than most people could follow. He wore the same trainers every day, white ones, now gray, with a split along the left sole that he had wrapped with a strip of plastic bag to keep the wet out. His jacket was 2 sizes too big, on the dark green puffers that someone had left in a bin bag outside a charity shop, and he had found before anyone else did. He did not have parents, not in any way that counted anymore. His mother had died when he was 6. A social worker had placed him briefly with a family in Tottenham, but it had not lasted. After that, there were other arrangements, other places, other people who tried and stopped trying. By the time Ezra was 9, he had learned that the only person he could fully rely on was himself. So he relied on himself, completely. He knew which supermarkets discarded food at what time. He knew which doorways were sheltered from the east wind and which ones flooded when it rained hard. He knew the routes of the night wardens and the gaps between their rounds. And he was 10 years old, and he carried this knowledge the way other children carried pencil cases. But Ezra had something else, something nobody had given him and nobody could take. He could dance, not the kind of dancing you see in studios or on screens. Ezra danced the way breathing works, naturally without thinking, because stopping would have felt wrong. He danced on the pavement outside the tube station and commuters slowed down. He danced at the edge of the market on Saturday mornings, and children pulled at their parents' sleeves to stop and watch. He made his body do things that looked impossible and ridiculous and wonderful all at once. And when people laughed, it was never at him. It was with him, because his joy was too big to stay on one side. Dancing kept him warm when the cold came in. It kept the hunger quieter. It kept him from disappearing inside himself on the worst nights when the concrete was hard and the dark felt permanent. That particular afternoon, Ezra was wandering the streets above Hampstead Heath when he passed the Hargrove estate. He had passed it before without stopping. The gates were always closed, and the hedges were too high to see much through. But that day, a small gap in the iron railing gave him a clear line of sight into the garden. And he saw her. A little girl in a wheelchair, white dress, red cardigan, her face tilted slightly downward, her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The kind of stillness that is not peace, the kind that is weight. Ezra stood at the gap in the gate for a long moment. He did not think about whether he was allowed. He did not think about the risk. He thought about one thing only. Well, she looks the way I feel on the bad nights. He found a space at the base of the hedge where the ground had dipped enough for a small body to slip through. He pressed himself flat and came out the other side on his hands and knees. He stood up, brushed the grass from his jacket, looked at the girl, and began to dance. What happened in the next 4 minutes would set everything in motion. But what Ezra did not know as he spun and stumbled and pulled the most ridiculous face he could manage was that someone was already watching from the window above, and that someone was not smiling. William Hargrove was on a call. He stood at the window of his first-floor study, half listening to his operations director talk about a delayed shipment, and half watching the gray London sky do nothing interesting. It was the kind of afternoon that felt longer than it was, the kind that pressed down. Then he heard it, faint at first. So faint he thought he had imagined it. He pulled the phone slightly from his ear. There it was again. Laughter. Not Margaret's polite, careful laugh, not the television. This was different. This was uncontrolled and bright and completely alive, and it was coming from the garden. It was Clara. William said nothing into the phone. He simply ended the call and moved to the window. What he saw made him go completely still. A boy was in his garden, a black boy roughly 10 years old, dressed in clothes that had clearly seen better years, dancing in front of Clara's wheelchair with the kind of commitment that suggested he had forgotten the rest of the world existed. His arms swung in opposite directions. His legs moved in ways that defied logic. He tripped over his own feet deliberately and caught himself with theatrical horror, and Clara's laughter hit a pitch William had not heard since before the accident. His first reaction was fury. How did this child get in here? Where were the gates? Where was security? This was his property and his daughter, and this unknown boy had no business being anywhere near either. William moved fast. He was halfway down the staircase before something stopped him. Clara's voice. "Do it again. Do the falling one again." William froze on the stairs. He had not heard her ask for anything in 3 months. He walked slowly to the bottom of the stairs and turned toward the garden doors, of throwing them open. He moved to the side window, the one with the angle that let him see without being seen, and he watched. The boy fell again, even more dramatically this time. He rolled, clutched his ankle, looked at it with profound offense, and then stood up and bowed. Clara clapped both hands together above her head. Her back was straight, her face was open. She was completely present in a way Margaret had been trying to reach for 7 months. William stood at that window for a long time. His fists slowly unclenched, his jaw slowly released. And somewhere in the region of his chest, something shifted that he could not immediately name. He did not go into the garden, not yet, but he did not call security either. He just watched and tried to understand what he was looking at, because whatever this boy was doing, it was working. And William Hargrove, who had built his entire life on the belief that every problem had a solution if you spent enough money and applied enough intelligence, was standing in his own hallway confronting the possibility that he had been looking for the answer in entirely the wrong places. He watched until Clara's laughter softened into a tired smile, and the boy took one last bow. Then William made a decision. Tomorrow he would be ready. Because if that boy came back, William Hargrove intended to be the first thing he saw. Ezra came back the next afternoon. He had thought about it all night, curled under the stairwell in the car park with his jacket pulled tight. He had thought about her laugh, the way it came out of her like it surprised her too, the way her hands flew up when she clapped. He had fallen asleep thinking about it and woken up thinking about it and walked the 40 minutes back to Hampstead thinking about nothing else. He found the gap in the hedge and slipped through. Clara was already in the garden. Margaret had brought her out early. She was sitting up straighter than usual, her eyes on the hedge, waiting. When she saw Ezra appear, she smiled so quickly it looked like relief. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded with her whole body. Ezra shook out his arms the way a performer does before going on. He rolled his neck. He looked at her with enormous seriousness and said, "Today I will be performing the world-famous shopping trolley." Clara giggled already before he had done anything. He launched into it. A full impression of a wonky supermarket trolley with a broken wheel, dragging one leg, spinning unexpectedly, or crashing gently into invisible shelves, apologizing to no one. Clara's laughter came in waves. Every time she thought she was finished, he added something new, and she dissolved again. Neither of them noticed William Hargrove step out of the garden door. Ezra saw him first. He stopped immediately. Every instinct he had developed over years of surviving told him the same thing in the same instant. Adult, expensive coat, property, run. He did not run, but his body went very still. Clara's voice landed between them. "Daddy, please. He was only dancing. Please don't send him away." William looked at his daughter, then he looked at the boy. Up close, Ezra was smaller than he had seen from the window. His trainers were falling apart. There was a thin scar along his left eyebrow that spoke of something William did not want to think about too hard. But the boy's eyes were steady, not defiant, not afraid, just steady in the way of someone who has learned to hold their ground because There is nowhere left to retreat to. "What is your name?" William asked. "Ezra." "How did you get in here, Ezra?" "There is a gap in the hedge, by the far wall. I did not break anything. I did not touch anything. I only came to make her laugh." William was quiet for a moment. "Why?" Ezra looked at Clara briefly and then back at William. "Because the first day I saw her, she looked like she had forgotten that things could be good. I know what that feels like. I thought maybe if I danced, she would remember." The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of a man recalibrating. William looked at Clara. Her cheeks were flushed. Her eyes were brighter than they had been in months. He noticed, and it was not the first time he had noticed, that her posture in the chair was different when she was engaged. Taller, more alive. He looked back at Ezra. "Where do you live?" Ezra did not flinch. "Wherever I can find." Usually near the heath. William took a breath that cost him something. "You can stay for today. In the garden where I can see you. You do not go inside the house. You do not touch anything that is not yours. When the light starts to go, you leave. And you eat before you go. Is that understood?" Ezra nodded once. "Yes, sir." William turned to go back inside. Then he stopped with his back still to both of them. "What was that thing you were doing when I came out?" Ezra glanced at Clara. "The shopping trolley." William said nothing, but the very edges of something moved across his face before he turned away. Clara looked at Ezra. He looked at her. "Showtime," she whispered. He grinned. Showtime. And the garden, which had been quiet and still and heavy for so long, came back to life. But neither of them knew yet that William had not gone back to his study. He had gone to the side window, and he was still watching. One afternoon became three. Three became a week. A week became two, William told the housekeeper quietly. The boy comes at 3. He eats at 5:30. He leaves before dark. Tell Margaret. Tell no one else. Ezra arrived each day with something new prepared. He was incapable of repeating himself without adding something. The shopping trolley became the shopping trolley in a thunderstorm. The clown became the clown who was also secretly a spy. He did impressions of London pigeons and double-decker buses and tourists trying to read the underground map. He invented games where Clara had to guess what he was doing, and she was good at it, faster than he expected, and it made him push harder to confuse her. Clara laughed every day. That alone would have been enough. But something else was happening. Her hands were getting stronger from clapping. William noticed it first. The sound of her clap had changed, fuller, more force behind it. Margaret noticed it too without saying anything. Clara began copying Ezra's arm movements from the chair. When he swung left, she tried to swing left. When he raised both arms, she raised both arms. She told him when he got something wrong. That is not how you did it yesterday. Do the footwork again. Slower this time so I can watch properly. Her voice was coming back, not just in volume, but in personality. The Clara who had opinions about things. The Clara who argued. The Clara William had been grieving quietly for 7 months was beginning to reappear, not all at once, but in pieces, like light coming back into a room when someone opens the curtains an inch at a time. One evening after Ezra had gone, William sat in the garden alone, not on a call, not with a tablet in his hand, just sitting in the chair that Margaret had left out, looking at the grass where Ezra had danced that afternoon. Clara had said something at dinner that stopped him completely. She had said, "Daddy, I felt my toes today when I was clapping, not like pins and needles, like real feeling, like they were trying to wake up." William had nodded calmly and said, "That was good news, sweetheart." And then he had excused himself and gone to his study and sat quietly for a very long time with his hands pressed together in front of his face. He did not cry. He sat very still and breathed and told himself to wait, to not hope too much, to not build something fragile on a feeling. But hope was already there. It had arrived without permission, the same way Ezra had. He called Dr. Okafor the next morning, Clara's lead neurologist. Oh, he described what had been happening over the past 2 weeks without mentioning Ezra specifically. Just the changes, the engagement, the movement, the toes. Dr. Okafor listened carefully and then said something William wrote down on the notepad beside his phone. She said, emotional engagement activates neural pathways that clinical environments cannot always access. Whatever is happening in that house, do not stop it. The brain responds to joy in ways we are still learning to measure. William looked at the notepad for a long time after the call ended. Then he looked out the window at the garden. He had spent 18 months and earned more money than he would say out loud trying to fix his daughter through medicine, through expertise, through the application of everything his wealth could reach. And a boy with a hole in his trainer was doing more in an afternoon than any of it had. That night, William poured himself a glass of water instead of the whiskey he usually reached for. He stood at the kitchen window in the dark and said quietly to no one, "Thank you." He did not know yet that the moment he was most afraid to hope for was less than a week away. And he did not know that when it came, it would not be him who made it happen. It would be Ezra. It was a Tuesday. The sky above Hampstead was the color of old pewter, and the garden smelled of rain that had not arrived yet. Margaret had wrapped Clara in a blanket before bringing her out and gone back inside to make tea. Ezra was performing what he called the slow-motion Olympics, moving through the air as if gravity had trebled. I'm throwing an invisible javelin in a movement so prolonged and agonized that Clara had been laughing for 2 full minutes without stopping. She was laughing so hard she had forgotten to hold the blanket, and it had slipped from her shoulders. "Wait," she said, trying to catch her breath. "Wait, I want to try something." Ezra lowered his invisible javelin and looked at her. "What kind of something?" Clara did not answer immediately. She placed both palms flat on the armrests of her wheelchair. Her expression shifted into something William would later describe as the most serious he had ever seen on an 8-year-old's face. She pushed, her shoulders rose, her spine straightened, her arms shook with the effort, but she did not stop. Slowly, with enormous difficulty, her hips lifted, an inch, then another. Then she was holding herself above the seat, suspended on trembling arms, her body rigid with effort. Ezra went completely silent. He counted without meaning to 1. From the garden door where he had appeared without either of them hearing him, William counted 2. 2. Clara's whole body was shaking. Her breath came in short, hard pulls. 3. She lowered herself back into the chair. Her arms gave out the last few inches, and she landed softly, panting. Eyes wide, face wet. Nobody spoke. The garden was completely still. Even the air seemed to hold. Then Ezra dropped to his knees on the grass in front of her and grabbed both her hands and said in a voice that was not entirely steady, "You just did that. Clara, you just did that." William crossed the garden in 6 steps. He knelt beside her chair. His hands were shaking when he reached up to touch her face. "I saw you," he said. His voice was almost nothing. "I saw every second of it." Clara looked at her father and then at Ezra and then back at her father. "I did not know if I could," she said. "But when Ezra is here, I feel like my body remembers it is supposed to move." The silence that followed was not the old silence, the heavy one that had lived in the house for 18 months. This was something else entirely, something that had texture and warmth, and the particular quality of a room after a long prayer has been answered in a completely unexpected way. William stayed kneeling on the grass for a long time. When he finally stood, he did not go back inside. He pulled one of the garden chairs close to Clara's wheelchair and sat down. Ezra sat cross-legged on the grass. Margaret appeared at the door with a tray of tea and biscuits and set it down on the garden table without a word and went back inside with her hand pressed to her mouth. They stayed out there until the light changed. None of them talked about what had happened. They did not need to. But that night, after Clara was asleep and Ezra had gone, William sat in his study for the first time in months without opening his laptop. He was thinking about Ezra, about who this boy actually was. about the fact that he was sleeping rough in Hampstead while William slept in a house with 6 bedrooms. And he was thinking about a question he had not let himself ask until now. What kind of man am I going to lie about this? He did not have the answer yet, but by morning he would. William asked Ezra to stay after Clara had gone in for her evening routine. Well, no, they sat in the garden together for the first time without Clara between them. The sky had gone a deep blue and the garden lights had come on, soft and amber. Ezra sat on the steps and held his mug of hot chocolate with both hands and said nothing. Waiting. Tell me about yourself, William said, not as an instruction, as a question. Ezra looked at him. Nobody had ever asked him that with the intention of actually listening. He started slowly, the way you do when you are not sure yet whether the ground is solid. He told William about his mother. Her name was Diane. She sang when she cooked. She died when he was 6, and he had not known what sick meant until it meant gone. He told him about the family in Tottenham that had not worked out. He told him about the different places, the different people. But he did not make it dramatic because he did not know how to be dramatic about it. It was just what had happened. William listened without interrupting, without checking his phone, without the particular expression adults sometimes wear when they are thinking of what to say next instead of hearing what is being said. Why do you dance? William asked when Ezra went quiet. Ezra looked at the grass. When things are bad and you stay still, the bad feeling fills up all the space. But if you move, it has to share the space with something else. And if you move in a way that makes people laugh, then for those minutes, the bad feeling has almost no room at all. It works for hunger too. Not forever, but enough to get through. William was quiet for a moment. You worked that out on your own, he said. Ezra shrugged. Oh, there was no one else to work it out with. William nodded slowly. He looked out across the garden and then back at the boy. Do you know what my daughter was like before the accident? He said. Ezra shook his head. She was the loudest thing in this house, William said. She laughed at everything. She had an opinion about everything. She used to run into my office and steal my pen and make me chase her down 3 floors to get it back. He paused. After the accident, I hired the best people I could find. I flew her to every city with an answer. I spent whatever it cost. And all of it put together did not do what you have done in 3 weeks with nothing but whatever that thing is you do. Ezra said nothing. William looked at him directly. I am not a man who finds this easy to say. But what you have given my daughter is the most valuable thing that has happened in this house since I lost her mother, and I am not going to pretend I do not see that. Ezra stared at his mug. William leaned forward slightly. You are not invisible, Ezra. Not in this house. Not anymore. Ezra did not cry. He was too practiced at not crying. But something shifted behind his eyes, and he pressed his lips together and nodded once very carefully, the way you do when you are trying to keep something in. That night when he left, he did not go to the car park stairwell. He walked to the heath and sat on the grass in the dark for a long time and let himself feel something he had not felt in years, the specific, dangerous warmth of being seen. He did not know yet what William had already decided, and he did not know that in 4 days, while Clara was going to do something that would stop every single person on the property cold. It was a Saturday. The garden was bright for once. One of those autumn mornings in London where the sun comes through clean and golden and makes everything look the way it should. Clara had asked Margaret to bring her out earlier than usual. She had been awake since 7. Ezra arrived at 3 and found her already sitting in the middle of the lawn, positioned differently than usual. Further from the path, more space around her on all sides. She had planned something. He could tell by the way she looked at him when he came through the gate, not the usual greeting, something more concentrated. He did a small warm-up routine to make her laugh, and she laughed, but she was not fully with him the way she usually was. Part of her was elsewhere. So after a few minutes, she said, Ezra, stop for a second. He stopped. I want to try to stand, she said. Not lift up like before. Properly stand, both feet on the ground. Ezra looked at her. Are you sure? She looked back at him. I have been thinking about it since Tuesday. I know my arms are stronger now. I know my legs have been feeling things. I want to try, but I want you here when I do it. William had come out of the house during the performance and was sitting at the garden table with a folder of papers he had not opened. He was watching now, fully. Margaret appeared at the garden door and stayed there. Clara placed both hands on the armrests. She had done this before, but this time she did not stop at lifting her hips. She pushed further. Her arms shook violently. Her face went red with the effort. A sound came from her that was not quite a word, just pure effort made audible. One foot touched the ground, then the other. Her knees bent, trembling, barely holding, but she was up. Both feet flat on the grass, her body upright, not perfectly, not without shaking, but standing. The folder slid off William's knee and hit the ground, and he did not notice. Margaret made a sound that she immediately covered with both hands. Ezra stood perfectly still. His eyes were wide and bright, and when he spoke, his voice had nothing performative in it at all. He said, "Clara, you are standing." She was shaking so hard the chair rattled behind her, where her hands still gripped the armrest. She held it 1 second, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then her knees gave and she went back into the chair, landing hard, immediately reaching for Ezra's hands. She was not crying, she was laughing. The big, uncontrolled laugh, the one that shook her shoulders and filled the garden. "Did you see?" she said. "Daddy, did you see me?" William was already crossing the lawn. He knelt in the wet grass in his good trousers and put his arms around his daughter and held her. And the sounds he made were not sounds William Hargrove had ever made in front of another person in his life. Ezra stood back to give them the moment. He turned away and looked at the far hedge and pressed his fist to his mouth and breathed. When William finally pulled back from Clara, he looked across at Ezra. He did not say anything. He did not need to. The look on his face was a complete sentence. That evening, after Clara was asleep, William sat on the back steps of the house in the dark. He heard footsteps on the gravel. Well, Ezra had not left. He was sitting at the far end of the steps, jacket pulled tight, chin on his knees, looking at the garden. William lowered himself onto the step beside him, and what he said next was something Ezra would remember for the rest of his life. They sat in the dark for a moment before William spoke. "You should not be out here in the cold," William said. Ezra shrugged the way he always did. "I'm used to it." William turned to look at him. "I know you are. That is not a compliment. That is something I intend to change." Ezra looked up. William did not look away. "What I am about to say I mean completely, and I have thought about it carefully, so I need you to hear it properly." Ezra was very still. "This is your home now," William said. "Not temporarily, not as a guest arrangement. You live here, you will have a room that is yours. You will eat 3 meals every day. You will go to school, and I will make sure it is a good one. You will have what you need, all of it." Ezra opened his mouth and closed it again. William continued, "I know what you have given Clara. You gave her the one thing I could not buy and could not arrange and could not fly halfway around the world to find. You gave her a reason to fight. You gave her joy when she had forgotten what it felt like. And you did it with nothing, with no motive except that you saw a sad child and decided to do something about it." He paused. "Anyone who does that is not someone I walk past. You understand me." Ezra's voice, when it came out, was very small. "You do not have to do this." "I know I do not have to," William said. "That is precisely why I am doing it. There is a difference between obligation and choice. This is a choice, my choice, and it is not a difficult one." The silence between them was warm and careful. Ezra looked at the garden, at the grass where Clara had stood that afternoon on shaking legs, at the lights of the house reflected in the windows, at the place that smelled like furniture polish and fresh flowers and something he could not name but that felt like the opposite of concrete. He looked back at William. "Thank you," he said. The words came out unsteady in a way he could not control. William put a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. "Come inside. Margaret will have left something for supper." They went in, and that night, Ezra slept in a bed with a duvet and 4 pillows and a radiator clicking warmly into the corner of a room that had curtains and carpet and a window that looked out over the garden. He lay awake for a long time, not because he was uncomfortable, because he kept expecting someone to come in and tell him there had been a mistake. No one came. He was still there in the morning. But what neither of them knew yet was that by Monday the story would be out. And not everyone in William Hargrove's world was going to respond the way Margaret had. It started with a neighbor. A woman on the street had seen Ezra coming through the front gate on a Friday evening. She had noted the trainers, the jacket, the age. She had said nothing directly, but London has always had its particular way of circulating information without anyone admitting they are doing it. By the following week, 3 of William's business associates had heard a version of the story. By the week after, a journalist had called his office asking for a comment on reports that the Hargrove family had taken in a homeless child. William declined to comment. The story ran anyway. London billionaire William Hargrove opens Hampstead estate to street child. Questions raised about welfare process, legal guardianship, and the responsibilities of wealth. The coverage was not entirely hostile, but it was not entirely comfortable either. His lawyer called. His PR consultant called. His oldest business partner, a man named Jeffrey who had known William for 20 years, took him to lunch specifically to say what he apparently could not say on the phone. "William," Jeffrey said, putting down his fork, "I am saying this as a friend, but you are a public figure with a significant reputation and a vulnerable daughter, and you have brought an unknown child off the street into your home without a formal process. People are asking questions. Your investors are asking questions." William cut his food without looking up. "What are they asking?" Jeffrey shifted in his seat. "Whether your judgment is sound, whether the grief has affected your decision-making, whether this situation creates liability." William looked up. "My daughter stood up last Saturday." He let that land. "She has not stood since the accident. She stood in the garden for 5 seconds and she was laughing when she sat back down." He picked up his glass. "Oh, so when you go back to whoever is asking those questions, you can tell them that my judgment is the soundest it has been in 2 years, and that I am not especially interested in their assessment of it." Jeffrey looked at him for a long moment. Then he picked up his fork. There were others, parents from the school William was enrolling Ezra in, who were careful in the particular way that people are when they want to communicate disapproval without being accountable for it. There was a comment section. There was a conversation on a local residence forum that William was shown and chose not to read past the first few lines. But there were also other things. A letter from Dr. Okafor saying that Clara's latest assessment showed measurable improvement in lower limb response, and that whatever had shifted emotionally appeared to be producing neurological results she had not projected at this stage. A drawing that Clara left on the kitchen table one morning. 2 figures in a garden, one in a wheelchair, one dancing. The one dancing had a big green jacket. Underneath it, in careful 8-year-old letters, it said, "My brother." Ezra himself, who had no awareness of the coverage and no interest in acquiring any, who arrived at Clara's room every morning with a new performance concept and left every evening having made her laugh until she was exhausted. William framed the drawing. He put it in his study on the wall where the industry awards used to hang. He had moved the awards to a cupboard. But what no one outside that house knew yet, not the journalists or the neighbors or Jeffrey, was what was about to happen in the garden 2 weeks later. Something that would silence every conversation that was trying to reduce the story to a question of liability or judgment. Something no amount of money had made possible. But that Ezra had. The weeks that followed were different to anything the Hargrove house had known. Not because they were perfect. They were not. Ezra had never lived in a house with rules before, and some of the adjustment was difficult in both directions. He did not know about homework schedules, or what time lights out meant, or why indoor voices were a thing that existed. Clara found his presence in the house equal parts wonderful and overwhelming, since she had been the only child there for so long. There were arguments, there were slammed doors. There was an incident with a football and a hallway window that William handled with more patience than he would have predicted of himself 6 months earlier. But the house was alive. Mornings began with noise, with Clara calling down the hallway, with Ezra appearing in the kitchen, still half asleep and eating toast, standing up because sitting down felt too formal, with William reading the news at the table and occasionally reading something aloud that he thought one or both of them should know about and being largely ignored. It was ordinary, gloriously, improbably ordinary. Clara's therapy continued. Dr. Okafor began working with a physiotherapist who came to the house 3 times a week. The standing became a regular practice. Then steps. Small ones at first, when her hands on the parallel bars, her jaw set, her eyes forward. Ezra was not always in the room for the sessions because the physiotherapist said the work required concentration. But he was always thereafter, sitting on the floor outside the therapy room, ready with something ridiculous the moment the door opened. The day Clara took 7 steps unaided across the therapy room floor, she came out into the hallway and found Ezra sitting against the wall, eating an apple and looking at the ceiling. She said, "I just walked across the room." He looked at her, without holding anything. She nodded. He stood up very slowly, looked at her. Then he did the shopping trolley impression, full commitment, broken will and all, in the narrow hallway, and Clara laughed until she had to lean against the wall. William, who had been standing in the doorway of his study listening to all of it, closed the door quietly and sat down at his desk. He did not open his laptop. He just sat. He thought about Catherine. He thought about what she would have made of all of this. He thought she would have seen it faster than he had. She always did. He thought about the version of himself that had stood at the side window the first afternoon, watching a strange boy dance in his garden, and felt anger before anything else. He thought about how close he had come to calling security. He thought about everything that would not have happened if he had. That evening, he sat with both children at the dinner table, and Clara told a story about something Ezra had done at the school that week, with the kind of detail and animation that told you she had been saving it all day to deliver at exactly this moment. Ezra denied most of it. William asked clarifying questions that made it worse for Ezra. Clara was triumphant. It was the loudest dinner in that house in 2 years. William looked around the table at some point during the noise and the arguing and the completely cold food that nobody had noticed going cold. He thought, this is what I almost protected myself out of. He did not say that out loud. He just reached for his glass and let the noise continue. One evening in late November, William stood at the garden door watching the last of the light leave the sky above Hampstead. Once the garden was quiet, the chairs were put away for the winter. The grass had gone dark and damp, and the amber lights along the path made the edges of everything glow faintly. He could hear Clara and Ezra somewhere upstairs, the particular sound of 2 children finding something funnier than they had capacity to handle. It came in waves. Laughter, silence, laughter again, louder. William had a glass of water in his hand that he had forgotten to drink. He thought about the afternoon 2 years ago when the police had come to his office, the particular way the officer had looked at him, the drive to the hospital that he had no memory of making, but that he must have made because he had arrived. The sight of Clara through the window of the ICU, small and still and wired to things that beeped and hummed and measured the distance between here and somewhere else. He thought about the months after, the quiet, the weight of a house that had more rooms than people and more silence than any of them knew what to do with. He thought about a gap in a hedge, a boy in a green jacket who had looked through it, seen a sad child, and made a decision so simple and so pure that William, a man who spent his working life in rooms full of people calculating advantage, still could not entirely believe it had happened for no reason other than kindness. Because Ezra had not come through that hedge for money, not for shelter, not because he had calculated what was on the other side. He had come because he recognized sadness and decided to do something about it. With nothing. Yet with only what he had always had, the movement and the joy and the refusal to let darkness win the room. That refusal, William turned that word over in his mind. He had read the end of that newspaper article, the one that had run 2 months ago. The journalist had called Ezra a street child without prospects whose circumstances had improved through fortunate proximity to wealth. As if that was the story. As if Ezra was a passive element in someone else's narrative. William had written a letter to the editor that his PR consultant had strongly advised him not to send. He had sent it anyway. In it, he said that the boy in question had more understanding of what it means to be human than most people William had sat across from in 2 decades of business. That proximity to wealth had nothing to do with it. That if anything, it was proximity to Ezra that had improved their circumstances. His and Clara's both. He stood at the garden door now and thought about money, about what it could and could not do. It could buy the best surgeons. It could not make his daughter want to stand up. It could furnish a house. It could not fill it. It could solve almost every practical problem a person could name. But it could not replace the particular and unrepeatable gift of someone who looks at your sadness and says, without any expectation of return, "Let me see if I can move it." Ezra had taught him that, not through anything he said, through what he did, through the shopping trolley and the slow-motion Olympics and the completely deranged pigeon impression and the 5 seconds in the garden when Clara stood on shaking legs and laughed. Upstairs, something fell over. Then more laughter. Then Clara's voice saying that was your fault, and Ezra's voice saying it was absolutely your fault in the particular tone that meant this conversation had at least 4 more rounds in it. William finished his water. He closed the garden door, turned off the light above it, climbed the stairs. He knocked on Clara's door. 2 voices told him to come in simultaneously. Clara was sitting on the bed. Ezra was on the floor. There was a card game in progress that appeared to have evolved its own internal logic and rules. William leaned against the doorframe. "Is there room for one more?" he said. Clara looked at Ezra. Ezra looked at Clara. This was a conversation conducted entirely without words. Then Clara moved along the bed and patted the space beside her. "Sit here, Daddy. But you have to start from the beginning because we changed all the rules." William sat down. Ezra dealt him in. And the house that had been a mansion for 18 months of silence was just a home again, full of noise and light and the particular, irreplaceable warmth of people who have chosen each other. Outside, London went on doing what London does. But inside, behind the iron gates of the Hargrove estate, 3 people who had each known what it meant to be alone were sitting on a bed arguing about card game rules in the best possible way. And none of them were alone anymore.